Imagine being blamed for a child you never carried, accused of a love you never asked for, and tied to a commitment you never agreed to. That was my life, the very moment when everything changed. In our village, stories travel faster than the wind, and once people believe a tale, it's harder to fight than the fiercest storm. This is the story of how my name was dragged into shadows, how my heart was tested, and how fate turned my world upside down. Please, before I proceed, hit the subscribe button, like, share this video to your loved ones. Thank you so much. A girl 16 years of age, her name was Mira, for better or for worse, painfully obedient. Life hadn't been kind to Mira. It had snatched her parents away too soon and left her with no one, forcing her into a world where she had to grow up far too fast. Her journey led her to the grand, imposing gates of the Martin family's residence in one of Abuja's most exclusive neighborhoods. She was the new housemaid. This massive, beautiful house, with its manicured lawns and marble floors, was now her entire world, her workplace, her bedroom, and her shelter. It was a golden cage, and she was the quiet little bird within it. Myra's life was a cycle, a relentless rhythm of work dictated by the rising and setting of the sun. Before the first rooster crowed, she was up, kitchen tiles. She cooked, she cleaned, she washed, she ironed, she polished. She moved through the house like a ghost, a silent engine that kept the Martin family's life running smoothly. She served them their meals, hot and fresh, while she often ate leftovers, cold, in the quiet of the kitchen long after they had finished. She would scrub the floors until her knees ached and her reflection shone back at her from the gleaming tiles. She would wash mountains of clothes by hand until her fingers were puckered and sore. Sleep was her only brief escape, a few precious hours in a room at the back of the house. She never complained. The Martins' house was the only roof over her head, the only shield from the uncertainty of the streets. The Martin family consisted of three main figures in Myra's life. There was Mr. Martin, a quiet man who was often away on business and barely seemed to notice she existed. Then there was the matriarch, his wife, Madame Rita. She was a woman who wore her wealth like a suit of armor, sharp-edged and intimidating. She wasn't always cruel, but she was demanding, and her approval was a rare and precious commodity. And then there was their son, Mark. Mark was a few years older than Mira, handsome and popular, with the easy confidence of someone who had never wanted for anything. He moved about the house with an air of entitlement, sometimes offering Mira a lazy smile, other times ignoring her completely. Mira, in her painful obedience, kept her head down and her interactions with him brief and respectful. She was the maid, he was the master's son. It was a line she would never dare to cross. Mira was in the living room, carefully dusting a glass cabinet, when Madame Rita stormed in. Her face was a thundercloud of fury. She wasn't shouting, not yet, but the silence that radiated from her was more terrifying than any scream. In her hand, she held a white plastic stick. A pregnancy test. Two distinct pink lines were visible, a clear and undeniable positive. She threw it onto the polished mahogany table, where it clattered like a gavel declaring a guilty verdict. Mira. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air. What is this? Don't lie to me. What have you done in my house? Mira froze, her heart instantly pounding. She looked from her madame's furious face to the test on the table, and a cold, sickening dread washed over her. She had no idea what was happening. Madam, I don't understand, Mira stammered, her soft voice barely a whisper. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the accusation taking shape in her madam's eyes. "Whose is this?" Madame Rita let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "Don't play innocent with me, you little snake. You think I don't see the way my son looks at you? You think I am a fool?" The accusation finally hit Mira with the force of a physical blow. Her son, Mark. She felt the blood drain from her face. "No, madam, I swear, on my parents' graves, it is not possible." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, madam, take me to the hospital. Please, let a doctor check me. I am begging you. They will tell you the truth." But Madame Rita was deaf to her pleas. She saw only what she wanted to see, a common house girl who had, in her mind, trapped her precious son. She shook her head, her face set like stone. "A hospital. So you can pay them to lie for you." She found Mark in his room, playing a video game, seemingly oblivious to the storm raging in the house. She stood at his doorway. "Mark, please," she whispered, "your mother, she thinks I am pregnant for you." Mark didn't even pause his game. He glanced at her over his shoulder, his expression one of mild annoyance, as if she were a fly buzzing in his ear. "And what does that have to do with me?" Myra's heart shattered to pieces. "Please, Mark. You have to tell her the truth. You know I have never. Please, just tell her." He finally put his controller down and stood up, walking towards her. For a fleeting second, she thought he might help. Instead, his face turned cold and cruel. "Listen to me, Mira," he said in a low voice. "I don't know what you're talking about. I barely even know you exist. If you're pregnant, it's your own problem. Don't you dare try to drag me into your mess." He looked her up and down with disgust. "You should have been more careful." When he told his mother his version of the story, that the desperate little maid had tried to trap him, Madame Rita's fury exploded. She grabbed Mira by her arm, her fingers digging into her skin like talons. "I gave you a roof over your head. I fed you. And this is how you repay me. By trying to bring this shame into my family." She dragged a sobbing Mira towards the front door, ignoring her cries of innocence. She didn't even let her go back to her small room to get her meager belongings. She took the small bag Mira had arrived with months ago and threw it out onto the street. "Get out!" Madame Rita screamed, her voice echoing in the large foyer. "Get out of my house, and never let me see your face again. I hope I never hear of you again." The heavy front door slammed shut with a deafening boom, the sound of finality. And just like that, at 16, Mira was homeless, alone, and branded with a lie she couldn't erase. She had nowhere to go. No family, no friends, no money. She walked for what felt like hours, tears blurring her vision, her feet aching, and her heart heavy with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. She was just a girl, accused of something she didn't do, discarded like trash. She eventually found a bus stop and huddled on the bench, pulling her thin wrapper tightly around her shoulders, trying to make herself invisible. Each passing car's headlights felt like an interrogation lamp, exposing her shame to the world. A church. She had always found a strange comfort in the idea of a house of God, a place where everyone was welcome. Hesitantly, she pushed open the heavy wooden doors. The inside was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the street and the turmoil in her heart. The air smelled of old wood, polish, and something else, peace. Rows of empty pews stretched out before her, silent witnesses waiting for their congregation save for an elderly cleaner sweeping near the altar. Mira felt a tiny flicker of safety. She sank into a back pew, exhausted and emotionally drained, and finally let out a long, shuddering sob. Crying attracted the attention of the cleaner, and soon, the church's pastor, a kind-faced man with gentle eyes, came to see her. Mira, with nothing left to lose, poured out her entire story. She told him everything: the accusation, Mark's betrayal, being thrown out onto the street. She didn't hold back a single tear. The pastor listened patiently, his expression filled with compassion. He didn't offer grand solutions, but he offered her something far more valuable: belief and shelter. "You can stay here for now, my child. The house of God is a home for all his children." Grateful beyond words, Mira insisted on earning her keep. So, she began to work. She cleaned the church with a devotion she had never felt before. Polishing the pews, sweeping the floors, arranging the hymn books, it was hard work, but it was for a place that had given her refuge, and humble work, her broken spirit back together. The church members came to know her as the quiet, diligent girl who kept their sanctuary spotless. One Sunday, during the main service, the church was packed, and the pastor was preparing his sermon. Mira was standing at the back, making sure everything was in order, when she saw him. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Mark. He was sitting with a girl, looking uncomfortable and restless in his fine clothes. Why was he here? Of all the churches in Abuja, why this one? Seeing him sent a jolt of anxiety through her, but she quickly pushed it down, turning her attention back to her duties. But her eyes kept drifting back to him. Mira noticed something strange. Mark leaned over and whispered something to the girl beside him, then stood up and began to make his way out. He was leaving. In the middle of the service. It was unusual, almost disrespectful. Everyone else was captivated by the sermon that had just begun. Why would he leave now? As he walked past the back of the church, his eyes briefly met Myra's. There was no recognition, just a flicker of annoyance at having to squeeze past her. But as he disappeared out the door, a thought, sharp and insistent, pierced through Myra's mind. Something is wrong. Her heart began to beat a little faster. An intuition, a gut feeling she couldn't explain, told her that this was important. "Follow him," a voice whispered in her head. "Just see where he is going." She pulled her scarf over her head, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. The bright Sunday morning sun was a stark contrast to the dark mystery she felt she was stepping into. Mark was walking quickly, purposefully, not like someone just going for a stroll. Mira kept a safe distance, her heart hammering in her chest. She darted behind market stalls and ducked behind cars, feeling like a spy in a movie. They walked through streets she didn't recognize, away from the wealthy avenues and into a more modest part of the city. With every step, the question in her mind grew louder: where could he possibly be going with such urgency on a Sunday morning? Journey ended in front of a nondescript pharmacy. Mira watched from across the street, her heart lodged in her throat. He went inside and came out just a few minutes later, clutching a small white paper bag. He looked inside it, then quickly shoved it into his pocket and continued walking, even faster this time. Myra's mind was racing. What could he have bought from a pharmacy that was so urgent? Medicine, obviously. But for who? And for what? The pieces of the puzzle were floating around in her head, refusing to connect. But the image of him clutching that little white bag was seared into her memory. It felt like a crucial clue, a key to a door she didn't even know she needed to unlock. He stopped in front of a modest but neat compound. He knocked on one of the doors. A moment later, the door swung open, and a young woman came out. Mira gasped. She knew her. Her name was General. She was one of the girls from the neighborhood who used to visit the Martins' house, one of the girls who had always looked at Mira with a mocking little smile, as if she were dirt beneath her expensive shoes. And then Mira saw it. Jen was visibly pregnant. Mark handed her the bag from the pharmacy, and she took it with a grateful smile. He then pulled her into an embrace, placing a hand protectively on her stomach. And in that single, tender gesture, the entire lie unraveled. The pregnancy test. The accusations. It was never about Mira. It was always about General. Mark had a pregnant girlfriend, and he had used Mira, the poor, voiceless housemaid, as a shield to protect himself from his family's wrath. She went straight to one of the church elders, a wise, respected woman known as Mummy Ruth. She sat with her and, with a newfound steadiness in her voice, recounted everything she had just seen. Mummy Ruth Joe listened, serious. When Mira was done, the elder woman patted her hand. "The truth, my child," she said, her voice firm, "is like the sun. You can cover it for a while, but it will not go away. We will go and speak to this family." Together, Mummy Ruth Joe went to the Martins' house. Madame Rita saw Mira at her door, her face hardened. "What are you doing here? I told you never to." Mummy Ruth held up a hand, commanding respect with her calm presence. "We have come to talk, not to fight," she said evenly. They sat in the living room. Mira told her story again. About seeing Mark in church, about following him, about the pharmacy, and about Jen, the pregnant girlfriend. At first, Madame Rita refused to believe it. But as Mira described, the exact location of the compound, the look on Jen's face, the details were too specific to be a lie. She called Mark into the room. When he saw Mira and Mama Aid, his face went pale. He tried to deny it, but his denials were weak, his eyes shifty. The truth was closing in on him. Finally, cornered and exposed, he lashed out, not at his mother, but at Mira. "So what?" he spat, his voice filled with venom. "What if it's true? You're still just a maid. Nothing will ever change that." His words were meant to hurt, and they did. Mira cried, tears of painful vindication. The truth was finally out. Mira at the church, but everything had changed. The truth was known, and though she received no apology from the Martins, a heavy burden had been lifted from her soul. A few months later, news came that the Martins' elder son, Daniel, was coming home for a visit. He had been living in Canada for years, building a successful career as an engineer. He was the opposite of Mark, known to be quiet, thoughtful, and kind. He had only been a teenager when Mira first started working for the family and had been away ever since. When Daniel arrived, he came to the church with his mother one Sunday, perhaps as an attempt by Madame Rita to appear devout. And his eyes found Mira. He asked his mother about her, and, perhaps out of a guilty conscience, Madame Rita told him the whole, shameful story. She told him how Mira had been wronged, accused, and thrown out, and how she had uncovered the truth about Mark all on her own. Daniel was horrified by his brother's actions and deeply moved by Mira's strength and integrity. He sought her out. He didn't approach her with pity, but with profound respect. They talked for hours, and he discovered a sharp mind and a beautiful soul beneath her quiet exterior. One afternoon, as they sat in the peaceful church garden, he turned to her. "Mira," sincere, I have never met anyone with a heart as pure and as strong as yours. You have more grace and dignity than anyone I know. I know this is sudden, but, would you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? Let me take you away from all this, to a new life in Canada, where you will be cherished as you deserve." Mira was stunned into silence, her heart flooding with an emotion she had never known. It was hope. And so, she said yes. The wedding was a big and beautiful ceremony at the church that had become her home. Her new family, the pastor Mummy Ruth Joe, and the congregation, were all there to celebrate her. Madame Rita was there too, humbled and quiet, watching the maid she had thrown out marry her best son. Mark was nowhere to be seen. Standing beside Daniel, dressed in a fine elegant white dress, Mira was no longer the painfully obedient, soft-spoken housemaid. She was a bride, a woman of strength, a survivor whose spirit could not be broken. A few weeks later, she sat by an airplane window, holding her new husband's hand, watching the lights of Abuja shrink below. She was leaving behind a life of pain and servitude and flying towards a future she could never have imagined. She had entered the Martins' house as a maid, a shadow meant to be unseen and unheard. She was leaving Nigeria as a cherished wife, ready to start a new dawn. The truth had not only set her free, it had given her wings. Myra's incredible story. It just goes to show you that no matter how dark the night gets, the sun will always rise again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring African tales. Your support means the world to me. Remember to be kind, to seek the truth, underestimate the strength of a gentle heart. Until next time, stay blessed.